This is the Anything Goes Project video stream. Please be patient, the show will begin momentarily. Remember, the show can be reached via email at stalkermailbox@gmail.com, or simply call in and leave us a voicemail at 361-433-5739. If you like the show, please subscribe and leave us a rating. This helps the show to be seen. More video streams can be found on the Anything Goes Project YouTube channel. To help the show, subscribe and like the channel. The Anything Goes Project can be found on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Castbox, Stitcher Radio, or anywhere you get your podcast media from. You're listening to the Anything Goes Project. Interesting topics, interesting things. Real stories by real people. Your host is Mike. The Anything Goes Project is a production of M&C Designs. Be advised, this show may not be suitable for all ages. Many of the topics are for mature audiences only. The explicit tag is there for a reason. If you would like to contact the show, email us at stalkermailbox@gmail.com, or leave us a message at 361-433-5739. And now, on with the show.
Good evening, everybody. This is Mike with the Anything Goes Project, and tonight it's your After Dark edition. Got a special guest with me tonight, Jennifer Whitacre. She's back for more. She keeps coming back. But this is actually a good thing, because a lot of these things that we discuss in the paranormal can be linked back to things that are happening in our brain. And this is why she's here. Jennifer, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Mike. How are you this evening?
I'm extremely tired.
Are you?
Yes.
It's been a long week, hasn't it?
It's been a very long week. Well, you knew my daughter was having some issues, and this has been ongoing for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh my goodness!
So we got everything squared away. She's at home. I went and picked her up yesterday.
Oh, good. I'm glad she's home.
So
really glad to hear that.
We've got more doctors to go visit, and it's a process.
Yeah.
So here we are. Your first time on the After Dark. We're going to be discussing stuff that you said you're not quite familiar with.
I know. You asked for a list of topics and then you picked ones that weren't on my list. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, how about next week if we decide to do this? You grab a few stories, I'll grab a few stories, and we'll back and forth with it.
Okay, we can do that.
That sound good?
That sounds good.
So I did have one story I wanted to bring up right off the bat. It's not paranormal, but it is scary.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I wanted to share this one is because a lot of people have phobias of the water and the ocean. Well, this story comes to us from UPI.com. They're a news network. And this was actually released on August 22nd. A California photographer was taking some drone video of some hydrofoilers. So you know what those are? Those are the electric version of a surfboard.
Mm-hmm.
And they push the button and they just zip around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he captured video of some of these apparently oblivious people being surrounded by great white sharks while they were on these hydrofoils.
Okay.
Matt Lermont said he was taking the drone video about 5 p.m. Wednesday of the people hydrofoiling, riding their electric surfboards off Capistrano Beach and Dana Point. And they were all of a sudden approached by a group of great white sharks. Lamar said he couldn't warn these surfers because they were about a quarter of a mile off ashore. Mm-hmm. And the photographer said that the shark was remarkably ambivalent about the presence of these humans. And I actually watched a video of it, and it's kind of interesting. Some of these sharks were huge. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like they could care less that they were there. Lamar told the Orange County Register, one of the clips I have, the guy being towed by the jet ski, they were going by and went past by a 6 to 7 foot shark. and the shark could care less when they went by. The sharks were being really mellow out there. Lamar said that the sharks even ignored one man who fell off the surfboard. And that was the part of the video I saw that where that guy fell off the surfboard, and there was a shark probably about 5 feet from him.
Interesting.
Didn't even see it. Just got right back on the board and kept going.
Yeah.
And
That's
Lamar
the
says,
best way to be if you're in that position.
yeah,
Is completely
Lamar said
oblivious.
he was freaking out. He said, I was like, he has no idea that there's a shark right next to him, Lamar said. He was just sitting there and had no clue. I would be freaking out if I was him, and it was insane to watch. And it kind of, that was all to the story right there. And I heard that, I first heard that, and then I read the article, watched the video, and I was like, yeah, that's, a lot of people have phobias of the water, and that's the reason why, because of the unknown in the water. He had this drone about 200 feet above him and could see everything. I was like, wow.
Well, we're encroaching on their territory.
Absolutely.
And if I were a shark and I heard some kind of bzzz noise or whatever from a motor coming through the water, I'd be curious. I'd want to go see what it was about, but I wouldn't want to get too close to it, I don't think. And, you know, and the bottom of surfboards, we've known for years, look like seals, especially whenever you have your legs and arms hanging off of it. And yeah, and maybe
one of those kids. I was one of those kids that grew up on the beach surfing. I was always very aware of that. Yeah. And I've been on the surfboards looking at the waves. You can't see crap in the water when you're right there at water level. Right. You don't know what's below you. Right. Right. So yeah, this, I can just imagine the guy though, Mark. I mean, oh man, what he was going through, because he pretty much felt helpless. There was nothing he could do. Well, it is a creepy feeling, and I can tell you a story about myself. I got certified to scuba dive. So to go through the certification process, I live in Columbus, Ohio. There's no open water where I live. So I did my initial certification, you know, as much as I could at a facility here in Columbus that has an indoor pool that's designed to, you know, help you learn to scuba dive. But I still had to go through my open water certification. And I did that on a destination vacation when I went to Bora Bora back in 2015. And I had to do 4 open water dives, and there were skills that I had to test for in each of my dives. And I had this set up before my trip. On my 3rd one, we're out in the ocean and we're diving, and I have to do certain rolls. I have to take my mask off and put it back on underwater and do some of this stuff. And I look over, and there's this 9-foot shark coming at us. And the other people in the group, there were like 6 of us, the other people in the group saw it and nobody paid attention. And I'm like, okay, they live here. I don't. So I'm going to follow the lead of the people who live here and who are in the water every day. They didn't pay a darn bit of attention. And the sharks were a little bit curious, but they didn't get too close to us. Like, they didn't get so close where I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to die. This thing's going to eat me. And the rule when you're scuba diving is you keep your hands to yourself. Like, you don't reach out to touch fish or anything, and if you do have to push off of something, you use your fingertips and you're very careful about it so you don't damage the coral or touch something that can hurt you, because there's fire coral and things like that. So the sharks, they really didn't care. And then a couple days later, I intentionally went snorkeling with sharks and stingrays. And the sharks that were underwater when we were scuba diving were lemon sharks. And there were 3 of them that eventually showed up that day. The smallest one was the 9-foot. The other 2 were closer to 12. So they were ginormous, but they did stay in the distance. Now, when we went snorkeling with sharks a couple days later, those were blue tip sharks. And they did come up and get close. And same thing, keep your hands to yourself, because if you reach your hand out and they get defensive and they perceive that they're going to be attacked in some way, they'll get defensive and they might bite. And then you've got blood in the water and a feeding frenzy. Right, exactly. And they're used to chum. So even though it was the open water and these are wild sharks, they're not encased in some sort of, because a lot of times in these snorkeling ventures, they have these underwater like
fences,
Mhm.
so to speak, to keep them enclosed in a certain area so they're a little bit tamer. This wasn't that. These are just wild sharks where they do this every single day, where they take people on these snorkeling tours.
And
So
they're
they're
used to seeing people.
oh, they are. They're conditioned. They're like a cat with a can opener. You know, you get cat. I'm a cat owner, and I have 3 black cats, and so you know the cats hear the cat food rattling, and they all 3 come running, and they're meowing, and so they're just conditioned, or like a dog with the can opener or the can of treats or something. They just come because they know they're going to get chum.
Yeah,
And
my dogs are the same way. They hear one piece of kibble hit that bowl,
mm-hmm.
and next thing I know, I've got 4 dogs standing behind me like, "Are
Yep.
we ready?"
Right. But I really wish people would stop complaining and stop the hype about shark attacks.
And
Because
that was why I brought this story up.
yeah, there's so few shark attacks a year. Our climate is in the process of changing. The temperature of the ocean water is changing. Therefore, the migratory patterns of the sharks are changing. So
Mhm.
we're seeing more populations in areas where we don't, like especially up and down the East Coast. A lot of sharks have been like off of North Carolina, you know, for example, because there have been more and more reported over here lately. And, you know, that has to do with the changing temperatures in the water and various other factors. And at the same time, that's where they live. So don't go into their home, into their water, and then bitch about it when you get bit. Because
And
to me,
you
that's
have,
just silly.
yeah, and you have a better chance of having a car wreck than you do getting bit by a shark.
Exactly.
I
You have a better
personally,
chance of getting stampled by cattle or stung to death by ants.
yep. I personally, like I said, I grew up on the water, on the
Mhm.
beach. I can remember I was probably about 13 years old. The tide had gone out,
Mhm.
and I waded through several sandbars till I was at like the 3rd or 4th sandbar,
Mhm.
good ways off from main part of shore. Well, the water in that area, in between the 2 sandbars, was probably about 3.5, 4 foot deep.
Mhm.
So it hit me right about here.
Yeah.
Well, back then I was about this tall. Hit me right about here. Well, I got in there and started messing around and was looking at, and I found a baby sand shark
Mhm.
that long.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, this is neat. He's stuck in between the sandbars. Okay, well, that's cool. So I'm not going to mess with him though. So, but I started moving around. He started following me. Well, he was nudging up against me and just doing stuff. So I was rubbing my hands under his belly,
Mhm.
keeping my hand away from his mouth because they're born with a full set of teeth.
Mhm.
And like Steve Irwin used to tell us, if it's got teeth, it will bite you.
Yes.
And
If you've ever had a kid, you know that's true.
yes. And so I was just rubbing my hand along its belly, and it became very just laid there, like it liked it.
Mhm.
I got done doing that and was like, oh, okay, cool. So I went out and I was doing some other stuff, and I was like, hey guys, come check this out. I started to go back in that sandbar, and I went, oh, never mind.
Mama showed up.
Mom had been in there the whole time.
Oh.
She was about 6.5 foot.
Oh my gosh. Well, you got, she must not have been hungry. She must not have cared. She must not have.
She must not perceive me as a threat.
Well, and that's the thing. Animals can pick up on that energy. And if you would have been a threat, I'm sure she would have been after you. But she can pick
Absolutely.
up on that. I mean, like, I swear animals know our intention better than we know our own intention sometimes.
That's why I tell people that come to my house, if my dog does not like you, there's a good chance I'm not going to like you either.
Right? I trust my cats.
So you said that you had some stuff on your list. What are some of the topics that you had on your list? Pop one off and let's see if I got anything on it.
Oh gosh, some of the stuff that was on my list. Let me go back and read it because I put a bunch of things on this list.
Well, I know
Mike.
you wanted to look at like the vampire lore, possibly the Bigfoot lore, and I actually did a show.
I put vampires, ghosts, ancestral curses, altered states of consciousness, hallucinations, attachments and possessions, sleep paralysis, archetypes.
Hallucinations and sleep paralysis are perfect.
Okay.
You want me to read that little bit I've got on sleep
Yes.
paralysis, and then I'll let you jump into it and talk about it from your standpoint.
Yeah, I've experienced sleep paralysis several times in my life. So
Once for me. So to any of my listeners out there, you've heard of sleep paralysis, but its original old name was called the night hag or the old hag. It is the name given to a supernatural creature used to explain the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. It is a phenomenon during which a person feels the presence of a supernatural, usually malevolent being, which immobilizes that person as if it is like sitting on their chest or at the foot of his or her bed. The word nightmare or nightmare is used to describe this phenomenon before the word acquired its modern, more general meaning. Various cultures have various names for this phenomenon and or supernatural character. In the Scandinavian folklore, sleep paralysis is caused by a mare, a supernatural creature related to an incubi or a succubi. Okay, the mare is a damned woman who is cursed, and her body is carried mysteriously during sleep without her noticing. In this state, she visits villagers and to sit on their rib cages while they are asleep, causing them to experience the nightmares. The Swedish film Marine examines the folklore surrounding deep sleep paralysis. Folk belief in Newfoundland and South Carolina and Georgia describe the negative figure of the hag who leaves her physical body at night and sits on the chest of their victim. The victim usually wakes with a feeling of terror and has difficulty breathing because of the perceived heavy invisible weight on his or her chest and is unable to move. And these are some of the experiences of sleep paralysis. This nightmare experience is described as being hag-ridden in the Gula lore. The old hag was a nightmare spirit in British and also Anglophone North American folklore. So there we go. And that is something that I've had a lot of people that have actually contacted me about, and they're like, "Oh, I've had the sleep," and they don't refer to it anymore as the old hag syndrome. They always call it now what it is: sleep paralysis. And everybody that I have talked to about it, it is a terrifying experience. Mine wasn't so terrifying because I knew what it was when it happened. My brain was able to register, oh no, this is just, you're having sleep paralysis. At first I was like, what the hell? And then it was like, okay, we're good. So let's go into that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm glad they don't call it what they used to call it, because, you know, you got to think about when, you know, nightmare, when it got its name. And, you know, the old, what was it? The old hag syndrome? Is that what you call it?
The old hag syndrome is what it used to be called. And then,
I knew the term nightmare originally came from sleep paralysis. And I knew that that was rooted like in, you know, the woman who is damned, or the incubi and the succubi. I knew about that. I don't think I'd heard the term old hag syndrome. But you got to look at when these terms came about and what was going on in the world. So there's a little bit of political misogyny thrown in there. So I'm glad we don't use those terms anymore, because it's another way to demonize women.
Right. The old hag, and I'll jump in real quick and say this. The old hag was usually in reference to the witch, an older woman who was supposed to be ugly in nature and everything. Right. Outcast in town that people, oh, she's a witch.
Right.
And so that's where the old hag part came from.
Right. I don't believe, I've experienced sleep paralysis several times in my life, and I don't believe that what I experienced is paranormal in nature in any way, shape, or form. My brain gave it meaning at the time. So I came out of it thinking, oh my gosh, what just happened? You know, was there something in the room? And from what I've learned over the years, especially about the stages of sleep, when you're in deep sleep, there is a paralyzing effect to the body. And, you know, like kids, dogs, you know, we all get into this phase of sleep whenever we're in that deep sleep where you can, you know, jostle somebody and try to wake them up, and it takes forever to wake them up because they're in that deep sleep and there is a bit of a paralysis to it. So people are really limp and they just kind of flop around when you try to shake them awake and they don't wake up. It is possible to become awake in that deep layer of sleep. And so your eyes pop open and you have conscious awareness that you're in the room, but you're in this still in this paralysis state. So your body hasn't fully come out of it. So your physical body is experiencing this state of paralysis or tonic immobility, but your eyes are open and you wake up and you can't move. And a lot of times it feels like you can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever you first wake up, you want to take a breath, but if you're in that paralysis, it's almost like your chest is really tight. So your chest isn't like really able to expand because of that tonic immobility. And then our mind immediately comes in with these uncomfortable sensations because we have different parts to us. Each and every one of us, I've got this down to 4 parts so far, and I'm not done with this theory. This is a theory I'm developing right now. So you guys are going to get a sneak peek at it. And it's, it's not just my work. It's like a whole bunch of other bodies of work that I've put together. But I believe that we all have a minimum of 4 parts to us. We have the aspect of ourselves who experiences life. So the experiencer, we experience the world through the language of sensation and emotion. And then we have a visionary aspect of ourselves. And that visionary aspect thinks in terms of visuals and images. And then we have the narrator who tries to put words to the visual and images. So anytime you've ever tried to explain your dream to somebody else, you can't, like none of us have ever fully translated a dream and what we experienced in the dream adequately in words to somebody else. There's always a shit ton of stuff left out because the narrator cannot adequately put the visual into language that everybody can understand. And then there's the observer, the other part of us. And the observer, if you're aware of the observer realizes the experiencer, the narrator, and the visionary all exist. So when the experiencer goes into this paralyzing state, and suddenly in the middle of it pops into conscious awareness, the narrator very quickly comes in and has to apply meaning to it. And has to say, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? And sometimes there is, some visual hallucination to it. And the visual hallucination that is associated with that physical state, that physiological state, often, the brain translates it into shadow people, somebody standing in the room. And in my experience, once I started to focus on myself and heal my trauma, because I've had a great deal of complex post-traumatic stress in my life. Once I actually started to heal and stopped denying what I was really encountering, I don't have them anymore. So I firmly believe that this was a manifestation of trauma, because once I started to heal, it's not there anymore. I haven't had one in, oh my gosh, at least 3 years at this point.
Yeah. Well, let's backtrack with what you said about the dreams, because I know you and I discussed this briefly about a week or so ago.
Okay.
About how the mind works in a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see words. It's like if...
No, our mind does not think in words and language.
And the written language, it thinks in images, colors, sensations, smells, all these things. I can firmly remember waking up to the smell of barbecue brisket. And it's like, I'm in my bedroom. There's no brisket there. I wish there was at that time, but but that's the way our brains work. So a lot of people, like you said, it's hard to describe what goes on in our brain, and it depends on who you're talking to, how they're going to try to decipher it. Because you've got people that are Freudian, and then you've got the Jungs, and then you get the people who bring different aspects of it to. I don't think anybody really has all the answers to it. We can kind of, I think we can kind of. It's more of a person has to look internally. And if you have one of these types of dreams, keep a journal by your bed. Write down what you remember. Somehow or another during the day, think about it and stuff. You might find some significance in that dream. It may be the fact that your brain was telling you, hey, look, you really did this person shitty over here. Maybe you need to apologize.
Yeah. And I also willingly do shadow work. Most people won't. So I do shadow work. And one of the best ways to approach your demons whenever you encounter one, your, so to speak, demons, like you see the shadow figure in your room, it is accept it and welcome it. Because you're laying there petrified and you get so wrapped up in the uncomfortable emotion of fear and giving meaning to that fear. If you could just interrupt the process and despite feeling the fear, say, okay, who are you? And more often than not, that thing will disappear. Every single time I've seen something scary, or I've been able to bring myself to a lucid dream or any shadow work that I'm doing, as soon as I turn around and confront the thing that is scaring the crap out of me, or the thing that's chasing me, or the thing that's after me and trying to kill me, as soon as I stop and turn around and try to confront my monsters, they shrink down into something. I'm like, oh, that's what this is? This is like that little incident with that toy from childhood, and it turned into this big monster that's been chasing me my whole life. And
No,
it does. A lot of times it shrinks down into some silly little, almost cartoon-like character.
now that's in the sleep paralysis. Now, how do we explain though the paranormal aspect of it, of people in gatherings, in crowds, that are seeing these shadow figures in, like, let's say the mountains? California is actually a place, Scott, where they actually talk about the dark watchers. And the watcher phenomenon is something that I've read a lot about, and it's really interesting because these characters or these entities, whatever they are, seem to always stay in
the dark watcher.
The dark watchers. They don't ever interact. They're just always off and in the distance watching. And they've been recorded throughout history, specifically at major events, major disasters and catastrophes. Well, so similar to the Mothman.
Okay.
But in California, there's a mountain range there that supposedly has these dark watchers, and many people have talked about seeing. They'll be walking in it, and it's like you look up at the ravine and you see somebody standing on that rock, looking down at you, got the long flowing cloak and hat and the staff. And you're like, oh crap, man, they tell you don't make eye contact. They're just here to observe. They don't acknowledge it. And then when you put your head back down and don't acknowledge it and look back up, it disappears. And you can just see it like dissipate and go. And so and people have seen these collectively as a group. So that's where my question is. I understand the sleep paralysis. And I'm the idiot that I'm going to be laying in bed and I see dark shadow on the side of the room. I'm like, hey, can you grab me a glass of water? So it doesn't bother me because I know what it is.
Right.
However, if I'm out walking one evening and I see a figure coming at me from the side, I'm probably going to crap my pants.
Oh, I'm talking about shadow work, like, going into your dreams or going into conscious type shadow work. I'm not talking about like, ghosts or entities or things that, would approach you. So there are a couple different theories here. So first of all, my theory about sleep paralysis is based on my experience. I haven't had sleep paralysis in a long time since I really can say that my complex post-traumatic stress is behind me. So that's my experience, and that's why I believe this. Now, there is another theory that could be entertained where I could be wrong on my experience and my original theory, and that is we see as humans, and what we're able to see with our eyes is about 1% of the total visual spectrum. So we know that there are other animals out there that can see different aspects of the visual spectrum. Some animals have better night vision than we do. Some animals echolocate, and so there's no actual visual, but they see, through another means and through other senses. And, some animals can see like more infrared, and, so
dogs can see into the ultraviolet.
Exactly. So when you think about the total visual spectrum that's out there in this little tiny sliver that we can see, and, everybody's a little bit different. We know this from our physical bodies, that everybody's a little bit different. For example, when I studied anatomy, just where muscles attach on the vertebrae, for example, well, it might attach your psoas muscle, it might attach up, as far up as like T12 or, something like, or T11 before it gets down to L1, L2, but I've only got 4 lumbar vertebrae instead of 5. So everybody's a little bit different. Like some of us are missing a bone here and there, or have different muscle attachments, things like that. So because of those differences, isn't it possible that in the visual spectrum that there could be ever so slight differences where some person has just a little bit of a variation of what they can see, where they might be able to see an aura whereas somebody else can't, or where somebody else is a little bit more tuned in to, what else might exist that is beyond what our human eyes are able to see with our limited rods and cones.
Or even just something in our brain that switched a little bit differently.
Right, exactly. And, you know, I've been on your show before and I've talked about some of my treatments with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And that really did turn around. I mean, that is the big thing that helped me put my PTSD behind me, or complex post-traumatic stress. And that changed everything for me. But what psychedelics can do when they're administered in the proper context, they can help put you in an altered state of consciousness that makes it safer inside your own body and inside your own mind to experience those traumatic events from your past that scare you to death to look at. Because I'd had a lot of trauma in my early childhood. Just a couple near-death experiences when I was a little kid. I almost drowned when I was 5. I almost killed myself in a snowmobile when I was in 6th grade. My mother died when I was 13 from cancer. You know, just layers and layers and layers of trauma that I brought out of childhood. And it has taken me most of my adult life to sort through some of that stuff. So I can see where I understand now in the studies that I've done on trauma, how that manifests in my physical body and how it literally altered how my physiology functioned. And there is such a thing as trauma physiology. And that's what I've learned to work with for myself. But now that's also what I work with my clients, is their trauma physiology, to work some of these imprints out of the physical body so you can get back to normal functioning. And that can make a difference in how you experience the world around you if you've got a lot of trauma physiology, because it affects your nervous system, and your nervous system includes your brain and your neurons.
And that's absolutely true, because whenever I'm doing any type of investigation that I get invited on, that's one of the things I like to have the sit down interviews with the people that are asking us to come out. Take a look. They think they have something going on in their house. Well, great. So I start asking questions like, I want to know, I got something in my eyeball. I started asking questions like, well, is anybody here taking any type of medication, specifically psychotropic meds? Because that can be an effect. And then it's like, okay, well, yes, I'm taking them for this and this. Oh, well, okay, then. So let's dive a little bit into that. And a lot of times you find out that some of this can be related to a mental illness. Some of it can be related back to the actual drugs themselves. I've had that happen once, where it was like, okay, you do know this particular drug side effect is hallucinations.
Yeah, side effects of medication will mess with you for sure.
And they're, oh, no, I didn't know that. Well, went ahead and still did the investigation, didn't catch anything. But now she's aware of it, that this very well could be part of her medications doing it. However, I have been to some places that I've caught all kinds of crap on videos and audio and stuff. That did you see the video clip I sent you?
I was out of town and I haven't watched it yet. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Well, on it, that's why I didn't tell you what was on it. I said, just check it out and listen to it. That's one of the video clips where I actually caught an audible voice returning conversation.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, okay, yeah, that's something there. That's not me having a traumatic experience, because unless my camera's having a trauma too. But so some of these things can't be explained. Now, since we're still on sleep paralysis, and we know what the sleep paralysis itself it does to our body and what our brains do. I'm curious though as to some functions, because I've heard of people that have gone through sleep paralysis and they have awakened with physical markings on them from whatever they perceived was actually attacking them. And so that's where you have to kind of go, well, what's going on here?
Yeah. And I've had that happen to me too. I've awakened with physical marks or bruises, sometimes scratches on my body that coincided with what happened to me in my dream.
Yeah. So in that situation, do we look at it as something that might be paranormal?
That I don't know. And here's why I say I don't know. As you know, well, and maybe you don't know, because I kind of wrapped this career up before I met you. I'm an expert level myofascial release therapist. I did that for over 10 years. And before I really transitioned and started getting into more trauma work and helping people with their anxiety and depression and overwhelm and stuff like that. So when I was a myofascial therapist, the fascial system is an entire system in the body of fascia. It's connective tissue, so it includes like your tendons, your ligaments, but it also includes what's considered the ground substance. The ground substance is the gelatinous goo that every single cell in your body floats in. So it's the environment of the cells. And it's rich in collagen, and it's the really only mechanism in the body through which, because it is a gelatinous goo, it's like a liquid crystalline matrix. And so it's the only system in the body that has the capacity for every cell to communicate simultaneously with every other cell. The nervous system doesn't have that capacity, and the endocrine system doesn't have that capacity, but those are two other forms of communication in the body. So what has happened, and if you talk to myofascial therapists, which I can put you in touch with some of them, we've seen some strange things happen. So I was working on a woman one day and, doing some work on her neck and shoulder here. And all of a sudden, while I was working on her, I saw this huge spot on her neck. It just right before my eyes turned into a bruise. And after a few minutes, it's turned kind of a reddish color, and then it slowly started to fade. And she was just kind of zoned out. She wasn't really noticing it. And I wasn't scared because I'd seen some weird things before. It was just, this was one of the most prominent up to that point in my career. And afterwards, I asked her, I asked her about it. I said, it looked to me like I saw this bruise show up on your neck. I said, I'm not sure if I saw what I thought I saw. And she was telling me that her mind, while she was on the table and while I was working on her, what she was experiencing inside of herself was a time when she was still married, and her former husband, had kind of karate chopped her right here in where the neck and the shoulder come together. And that had been a problem area because, that he was abusing her, and he came right down on that spot. And she said, I had a really big bruise there for a long time after that. It took a long time for that to heal. This didn't happen to me, but there was another therapist somewhere in the Midwest. I don't remember what state it was, but anyhow, I guess it's irrelevant right now. This other therapist had a client who years prior had been in a horrible accident, and she didn't fully know the details of the accident, but this client went into what is called an unwinding. And because very few people are injured laying flat on their back on a massage table or a treatment table. So sometimes, in order to release the trauma that gets imprinted in the physical body, the human form has to get into a three-dimensional, position in space, which is where the trauma was incurred. So sometimes people will go into unwindings where the body starts to move, even though the mind isn't consciously making the body move. And that's what was happening. And this therapist said, I swear I saw a tire mark go across the skin of this person. And this person had been run over by a tractor years ago.
Ow.
And the unwinding, literally, it worked its way out of the system. So the human body there is so much about the human body that we don't fully understand. And so you talk to body workers and therapists who do this type of work, and we see weird stuff like this all the time. But we don't often talk about it to the average person because they think we're weird. And the more we get into studying things like
welcome to my show.
Yeah, but the more we study things like quantum physics and epigenetics and stuff like that, there is a physiological reason for it. And one of the reasons we're not finding the physiology behind it is because mainstream medicine and mainstream research still is looking for molecules, and they're still trying to pick us apart, trying to find the atom or the molecule or the God particle or whatever it is. We're still trying to investigate the physical. We're not looking at the mind, the spirit, the emotions, they're still poo-pooing that and not paying attention to it. And one of the reasons is there's, this big push for this gold standard research, and anecdotal evidence is written off and poo-pooed. Well, when it comes to the subconscious mind, when it comes to the experiencer, when it comes to the visionary, and when it comes to the observer, those things are really, really important to how we experience life. So the anecdote is just as important as the science. And until we combine the two and really start to look for the invisible, we're never going to figure this out.
Now, I mentioned this about a week and a half ago about when you're doing research in this field, paranormal or any of this stuff, a lot of times you have to look at the anecdotal and the historical evidence. Because let's say you have a castle that is 400 years old, tragic event happened there. And people know, or people say that the castle's haunted. They have activity or have recorded activity or had experienced the activity in this for 400 years.
Right.
And we're talking people that have come to these castles to stay the night or whatever that may not know the history of it. And they're having the exact same experiences as somebody 100 years ago had and recorded it.
Yeah.
So, there's no physical evidence there. It's anecdotal.
Exactly.
And historical.
Right. And again, this is just one of my personal little theories. I don't know that it matters, but it's one of my personal theories, because I see people with their thoughts and behaviors get stuck in a loop as a result of trauma. Because I do study intergenerational and developmental trauma. Those are the two things I focus on the most, and the lifelong effects of the trauma. So if trauma can get imprinted in our physical bodies, and if trauma can get imprinted in our thought processes, and if it can get imprinted in how we experience the world, which it absolutely does. So if it can get imprinted in some of these non-tangible ways that we experience the world, is it possible that the location where a trauma happened, or a horrific event, because you don't hear this in, where people have nice, happy lives. There's always some sort of horrible, terrible event that happened whenever you hear of ghosts. It's never happy stories.
Not necessarily. I've heard of a few where that it's been like something pleasant. It's in a pleasant neighborhood, and it's in like a new, but usually it's something that's trauma.
Usually the death was traumatic or unexpected, or, the person didn't see it coming or died young or something like that. Usually there's some sort of trauma involved. So is it possible that the location of a trauma could energetically get stuck in a loop? And because our implicit mind learns through what it feels, through senses and emotions, that's how our implicit mind learns. It's a very different beast than our memory recall and our mind inside our head. It's a very different beast to work with. And I had a woman on my show a few months ago, and she called the implicit mind our hidden control panel, because most people don't even know it exists. And they think that their mind is in charge, and it's not. It's our implicit mind that's in charge. And until we become aware of it, we can't work with it. So that implicit mind is like our spidey sense. That's the dog. That's the kid. That's the part that, the kids and dogs, when they start barking or they don't like somebody, that's why, because there's somehow sensory picking up on something that they don't like, that doesn't feel good, that's emanating off of that person. So if there's stuck energy in a place, could that aspect of us that we don't acknowledge our gut instincts, could that aspect of us be picking up on that through our little spidey senses? I think it could. I really do.
Now, have you heard of the stone tape theory?
I've heard of the stoned ape theory.
No, that was on Joe's show. Wrong show, guys. So, Jennifer, have you tried DMT?
Yes, I have.
Okay, great. Now we can move on. Okay, the stoned tape theory. What that is basically exactly what you just said. A tragic event is imprinting its energy. We know through science that the human body gives off an energy signature. We radiate heat energy. We radiate electrical energy. Our brain is constantly pulsing electrical pulses throughout the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay. The stone tape theory basically is that an environment, there's something in that environment that can capture that energy, such as in Gettysburg. Have you ever been to Gettysburg area?
I have.
Very rocky soil.
Mm-hmm.
Rocks can store energy.
Yep.
Magnets.
Yep. That's why New Age people like their stones and crystals.
Well, so that's what the stone tape.
See? See behind me?
Yeah. Well, I just said stoned ape theory again. Okay, I'm going to explain that real quick for any of my listeners who do not know what the stoned ape theory is. It's basically, it was the evolutionary changing point of Homo erectus becoming the human. We found shrooms.
Right. That's what separates us from the animals.
We found shrooms and realized, no, actually, dolphins do a pretty good job of getting stoned too.
Yeah.
If you're watching, yeah, pass, puff, puff, pass, pass. But okay, so I need to stop. So,
what were we talking about?
Stoned tape theory. Okay, so basically, a tragic event happened at Gettysburg. We all know that.
Right.
People lost their lives in a traumatic way. It wasn't like everybody just laid down all of a sudden and went, "Oh, I'm dead." No, They had holes put in them and shit.
Right. It wasn't Heaven's Gate.
No, they were blown away and things. So that energy signature getting trapped there. Many people go to Gettysburg and visually have seen what they thought was a reenactment going on in the fields.
Yeah.
And then turn away and go back. And now there's nobody there. So are they seeing this on a loop?
Possibly.
Sort of like a tape. That's where I get the stone tape theory, because the stony ground storing the energy, replaying it as a tape.
Yeah,
such as
very possibly.
And I talked to you about this too last week, and I discussed this with Marie D. Jones, but we were talking about hauntings and cemeteries. That wasn't a place somebody died. We know that. But I thought of the idea that some of these, again, trapped energy being replayed on a loop, such as somebody had a precious item that they were buried with. A gunslinger being buried with his gun. Grandma.
Well, some people did die in cemeteries.
Yeah. Well, and then grandma. Yeah, that's why the dead ringer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they used to have a lot of the vampire lore, because, you know, the vampire craze, people would sometimes they would dig up bodies to see if it was a vampire, and they would see scratches on the inside of the coffin, or they would see blood coming out the nose or the mouth, and not understanding the death and process of decomposition, they would think the blood coming out of the nose or mouth meant that it had been a vampire that had gotten out of the grave, and that's not true. But sometimes people were buried alive and tried to get out of the casket when they woke up, and then obviously suffocated to death because air ran out, but they would try to scratch their way out. It wasn't anything paranormal. Yeah.
And that's where the term that we've got, the dead ringer, came from, because when they would bury people in these, that's before we had when it was like, they just checked you. Is he breathing? No, then he's probably
put a mirror
dead.
Under your nose.
Yeah, then he's probably dead. Okay, put him in a thing. Well, you wake up, now you're 6 feet underground. So what they were doing was they would actually run a string down into your coffin that was attached to a little bell above your grave. They'd give you about 6 or 7 days. That bell didn't ring by then. Yeah, you're dead. So, but yeah, the vampire lore that we discussed, that you just discussed, that there were several cases in the United States of a minister who was actually going around. It was during the time when everybody was dying of consumption, tuberculosis. Okay. Well, we all know how tuberculosis today is spread. It's spread. It's a communicable disease. If I cough on you, you've just been exposed to the disease. These families didn't know that back then. So you'd have one person in the family that had tuberculosis. They'd be sitting at the dinner table, hacking and coughing all over the food, all over the people sitting next to him, sleeping in most of the times the same beds, and just exposing everybody. Well, that person would die. And then somebody else in the family would get sick. and then they would die. Well, this minister was going around and saying that it's a vampire. That vampire has cursed your family. So what they were doing is going and digging up the first person that died, removing their heart, burning it, and then going through like a ritual. Because they just recently, I was listening to a podcast where they unearthed the grave, where they actually found the femur bones taken off of the corpse and laid in a cross across the chest of it, right under the skull. And then the jaw actually had a rock wedged in between it and was slammed shut to where it couldn't move. And that was part of the stuff of like, yeah, it's like, you got a vampire. And so that, like you said, they didn't understand how the body decomposed, that as it was going, of course, you're going to have some leakage coming out of some orifices.
Right.
So, yeah, it was really interesting.
Same period of time we didn't understand germs.
Yeah,
that was in the 1800s with Louis Pasteur before we.
Yeah, it was like, hey guys, maybe we would kill less people if we washed our hands.
Right, but he had a hell of a time convincing people.
He got laughed out of medicine, and actually, I believe he was jailed at one point for being a heretic.
Yeah, I mean, he was horribly persecuted for his theories about germs.
And for those people who don't know, let me explain that real quick. I don't remember the gentleman's name though, but he was a doctor who specifically he dealt a lot with delivering babies. Well, most of the doctors back then would go downstairs into the morgue, cut up bodies, examine them, trying to see what's going on, trying to learn more about the body. Oh, hey, so-and-so up on the birthing ward is giving birth. Let's do it. We're good. Wipe your hands off on your stuff and get up there. And now they're putting their hands down there and all the little tidbits with a corpse's blood and germs on them. The mortality rate of women was, oh man, they lost women left and right in the hospitals back then. And this one doctor said, you know what? Maybe we should wash our hands before we came back up here. You know, maybe there's something to the fact that we've got blood of somebody who just died on us. And again, he was laughed out of medicine. I believe he lost his medical license for that, or was no longer allowed to practice medicine at that point. He was jailed at one point. And then along comes somebody with a microscope. Hey, there's little stuff in this that's making us sick.
Yep.
I'm
trying to find, there's an interesting book that talks a lot about this, about how germs were discovered and that whole story. And it's called The Butchering Art.
I think I've heard of that book. Somebody just recently mentioned that to me.
I have it on Audible. So there's the cover. I pulled it up. It's pretty interesting book. If you like that sort of thing.
I do. I enjoy that kind of stuff.
You might enjoy that one because it goes into the history of like surgeries and, butchering.
What's weird is I got a moth flying around in my office right now. It's driving me nuts. Yet a minute ago, he took off and went to the side of my screen, and I could swear I saw him fly through your area.
Perfect.
I was stay over there.
But Mike, I want to circle back around to what you talked about a minute ago about the electromagnetic field from the body.
Go for it. Let's do it.
So since you and I have last done one of these collaborations, I have acquired my coaching mentoring certification from the Heart Math Institute in California. And the Heart Math Institute is doing research, trying to put, the way I explain it, they're trying to put science to the woo-woo. And they have machines that can measure the electromagnetic field of the heart.
Hang on. If we're going to be talking about woo-woo, I have one for that, a sound effect for it.
No, this isn't. Well, go ahead and use your sound effect, but this is actually science, so it's not woo-woo anymore.
Open your mind.
There we go. It's just an echo of open your mind.
Well, this is actually reporting science, so it's not so woo-woo anymore. But so they have devices that can measure the electromagnetic field of the heart. And so they've got volunteers that they're hooking up to these machines. They have devices that will measure the electromagnetic field of the brain. And they have devices that can measure the physiological fight or flight response in the body, which is called sympathetic activation. So when you go into fight or flight, a lot of times your palms get sweaty, your heart rate increases, and it's like all your energy goes into your limbs, your mouth starts to get dry. So they have machines that they'll hook people up to that can measure all three of these at the same time. And what this study measured was they had people sit down in front of a screen, and they were the computer program or app or whatever it was would randomly put images on the screen. And when I say random, the people who were conducting these trials didn't know what image was going to come up next. So it was random to the people conducting the experiments too. So the images were meant to elicit an emotional response. So it might be like a snake coiled up ready to strike, or, like looking straight at you when it pops on the screen. Or it might be, like a kitten or a puppy or a sunset or a scene out of a horror movie, where somebody was butchered or something like that. So really meant to ignite your emotions. And what they discovered was the first monitors that went off were the monitors of the heart. And by the way, the electromagnetic field of the heart, at this point, like whenever I went through my program earlier this year to get this certification, they reported in my class that they're able to measure the electromagnetic field from the heart 8 feet from the body in any given direction. Wow. And the only reason they can measure it at 8 feet is because their equipment will not measure any further than 8 feet. And they suspect it goes much further. The electromagnetic field of the brain is a few inches. So kind of like the halos you see in the religious pictures is about where the EMF of the brain goes. And so in this experiment, what they noticed was the heart monitors went off first, and then the brain monitors went off. So the heart field was activated first, and then very quickly followed by the brain, and very quickly followed by the fight or flight response, the sympathetic or parasympathetic. So it was either the heart racing, palms sweaty, subtle effects of mouth getting dry sort of thing, or the rest and digest, where the heart slows down a little bit or relaxes and you get a feel-good feeling in your body. All of that happened fraction of a second before the image actually came on the screen. And it wasn't 100% across the board, but it was so statistically significant that they sent the everything they did in the study, they sent it out to other research institutes and said, well, you look over this. We want to know if you're seeing what we're seeing. And the independent research institutes got back and said, yeah, we're seeing what you're seeing. So it's almost kind of verifying this. And again, it's just a fraction of a second, but that precognition that we have before an event actually happens. So again, it's not explaining anything yet. It's a toe in the door, and we know this much about it right now. And there's so much more that we can learn, but I am so glad that there are facilities out there that are researching this stuff and trying to apply science to it, because even though it doesn't really give us huge answers, it's a step in the right direction, and it's starting to answer some questions.
Okay, now with what you just said here from that study, my brain went to somebody who's investigating a location, a haunted location. One of the tools they use, an EMF detector.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if you're placing that on the floor, and you just said that those detectors were able to detect the EM pulses from the heart at 8 feet away. Most people are standing within 2 or 3 feet of their EM detector.
Yeah.
And if they're all of a sudden asking the questions, trying to elicit a response back, well, obviously adrenaline's going to kick in, their heartbeat's going to amp up, they're going to start to get the excitement going. So maybe this detector is actually detecting us.
But what are we responding to?
Just the excitement of doing the investigation. Or, like you said, something maybe precognitive that we're expecting.
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe something is there that we're picking up on and we just can't see, because all these monitors went off before the images actually came on the screen. It's like something within us knew, something within the people knew that something was going to happen. And like I said, it wasn't 100% across the board, but it was statistically significant. So, they kept going with it because it was so statistically significant.
Well, that's what made me think about the EMF detector, though, when you said that about
Right.
the part being able to, because that's just something that's recently been put into the investigative toolboxes that everybody are using. And I think it's a good tool because I've actually used one before because you go, and the reason I use it was not necessarily to go, oh, look, it's going off right here. There's something here. No, I'm actually going around and running it all across walls, stuff like that, finding out where the electrical wiring is running. Somebody's telling me they're having an experience in this particular corner of this room almost daily. Well, I'm going to run an EMF detector over there. And many times you find out that, hey, you know what's right on the opposite side of that wall? Your breaker panel. And you get residual EM fields coming off of electrical copper wiring.
Oh, for sure.
And those EM fields can have an effect on can actually invoke hallucinations.
Oh, for sure. And it's been well known for decades that people who live next to like substations and high powered overhead electric lines, things like that, like the really big
the ones that you can hear humming.
Yes. Those are not good for our health.
Yeah.
And that's been known for ages that, the stronger.
There's been many lawsuits over that kind of stuff too.
Exactly. Because a lot of people who live close to that end up with cancers. And same thing with cell towers. Cell towers, like the closer you live to cell towers, if you've got one in sight of where you live, you might want to move. It's what I think. And this 5G.
I just got it. I got good signal now.
Oh my God. But this 5G.
No, it's about 12 miles down the road.
Yeah. Like some of the 5G towers that are going up already. I mean, they're just seeing like piles of dead bugs and dead bees.
Let's talk about 5G, how it has changed my life.
Oh my God.
I was in Houston the other day and I was sitting there I was looking down at my phone and it all of a sudden said 5G and I went, what? What is this? Yeah. I'm used to having 1 bar and LTE. So I touched a YouTube video and it started playing instantly. I was like, oh, now this is the bomb.
Yeah. Well, I
live out in the country. I don't get any of that.
That is not good for the health of any living creature on this planet. And there are people who are anticipating, widespread health detriment as a result of 5G because of how strong the EMFs are that come off of that.
Yeah. And 5G itself isn't necessarily the field that just stands for generation 5 of Wi-Fi or of signal.
Right. But this signal is so much stronger and so much faster. And I mean, it's different than the other G's that have led up to it. So, and like, I'm just hearing across the board, I've been hearing for months how bad of an idea this is. And the more I learn about it,
I'm kind of at a toss up right now. I've been hearing both sides of the story and I just kind of want to see some actual studies now. Because it's still too new. We don't know yet. I mean, I've got people that are saying, "Oh, well, 5G is going to do this," and I'm like, "Have you ever even? Don't even have it everywhere. It's like very spotty in like 2 or 3 places."
Well, they're already seeing dead insects and dead animals around it.
If it's mosquitoes, I'm all for it.
No, we're talking bees, and we need bees. We need bees, but I've seen a few videos of people, just documenting dead bees at the base of these towers. It's like they just drop dead. Again, anecdotal. It's like social media type videos, YouTube type videos. That's not saying that every person out there is crazy. And at the same time, it's not saying every person's not. The average person a lot of times sees things that the rest of the world poo-poos, and there's some validity to it.
I'm looking here through my stories, see which ones we got left. I did have one. I had this one I don't actually have to read because this one I heard about today. It was a really interesting story from one of the First Nation tribes. And have you looked at any of like the Fae folklore?
The Fae folklore, like fairies?
Yeah, fairies. Tuatha De Danann. No? Oh, come on. You need to. I'm okay. I'm a fiction writer. I love this kind of stuff. So, okay.
I'm a nonfiction reader.
I read nonfiction too, but I'm a fiction writer. So I'm constantly looking at these stories. But this story actually came from the First Nation tribe. And they were talking about, one of the elders in the tribe was talking about how she remembered going out into the garden one day and she saw one of the little people, what they called the little people, the gnomes or the fairies or elves. And they were real respectful towards nature and the beings that they thought inhabited nature and stuff. So she was respectful. But then she noticed that her jewelry started coming up missing in the house. So she didn't know what to do about it. So she told somebody that it was either a nephew or something. And he was like, we'll take care of this. So he fashioned little hats and clothes and little jewelry trinkets and stuff, and put them on a dish and took them to where she normally put her jewelry and said, this is for you. If bring back the other stuff, you can have this. This is for you, out of respect. And so they left. And he said that he was downstairs with the older woman and they were sitting there, and all of a sudden they hear scurrying and stuff upstairs. When they went upstairs, all the stuff that he had made was gone from that dish and had been replaced with all her jewelry.
Oh, fun.
So that was just one of the little stories that came from one of the Native American First Nation tribes.
Okay. Okay. I hadn't heard the words that you said. I couldn't even pronounce them again.
The Tuatha De Dudanan. That's Celtic. That's Celtic. That's what they call the Fae.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of fairies. And I don't know, like I don't know what I think about fairies, because where I live now, I have a pretty decent sized lot for living in town, and I have, trees all the way around 3 sides of my lot. And I have a couple spots where I'm like, it just feels to me like, I don't know, like if there are fairy folk, this is where they live.
Have you ever had the fairy circles pop up?
I used to have fairy rings in my yard when I was a kid, a lot.
I
haven't seen them where I live now, though.
We get them all up and down in our area, and I've stopped several times and taken pictures of them because they're beautiful. I mean, it's a perfectly symmetrical ring of these mushrooms. And the lore is, when you see that, it's because that night the fairy council met.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That was where they sat to have their council meetings. And supposedly, and I've never actually had a chance to do this, but I would love to take some readings and audio from the inside of the ring, because I've stood in a few of these rings when I've taken the pictures, and it just feels different.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, maybe it's the actual fungus itself putting off its own electrical impulses.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
But now, another story that I had for us tonight, and I shot it to you, told you what we were doing, and you were like, I haven't got a clue what that is.
I know, I'd never seen one of these. I looked it up like right before we got online. I go, I've never seen this thing before.
Okay, if you get a chance after we get off, I want you to start doing some research on the Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, I've heard of the Skinwalker Ranch, but that's about UFOs.
Not the Skinwalkers, though, are also the Shapeshifters that are on that ranch that they see running across these ranches.
Oh, okay. Because I always associated Skinwalker Ranch with the what is it, Bigelow Airspace? Yeah,
and Bigelow Airspace. But they're supposedly
UFOs and yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch supposedly has to get out of my area. This one moth, I can't get him out of my office. He drives me insane. The Skinwalker Ranch supposedly has like these shapeshifters, these skinwalkers on it. And the Skinwalker legend is originally from the Navajo tribe, and it's pronounced the Lananshi.
Okay. Which
is the Skinwalker. And what a Skinwalker is somebody who has made a deal, not necessarily with the devil, because, in the Navajo tribes, they don't actually have the devil. They just made a deal with a dark entity. Get this magic to shapeshift. And they use this to conceal their identity when they do their things. So it can be a coyote, an owl, some of the accounts talk about a wolf, a man-sized wolf running on its back legs.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many accounts of these things, like somebody would be driving down the highway at 55, 60 miles an hour, and this thing would be running beside them and reach over and scratch or tap at the window. And it's terrifying. But
That would scare me.
I have a story that actually comes from one of the Navajo.
Okay.
And maybe I should get my music going here. Okay.
Do.
My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, Nevada or Minnesota. What's NM?
NM, New Mexico.
New Mexico.
MN is Minnesota.
I was sitting here. I've been all over. Okay. New Mexico. We mostly deliver packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we got a delivery out to the Wind Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo Reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he is chilling with his Navajo friend, Travis, and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got family in Wind Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests that they go with him. It was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was the summertime, so Dad decides we'll go down together. He can do this delivery really quick. Then, while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Wind Rock, Big Rock Face. That is a large hole that goes to the other side, and it's pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded right down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so that we could communicate with one another. We spent our time in Wind Rock. Everything was generally uneventful, and we started heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front, and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Wind Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Wind Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway, there was nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there was a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crested the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill, we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey, Trav, do you see that big-ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That's not a dog. Speed up. Right now. Hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it. You have to hit it. Please. Please hit it. Hit the fucking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a little bit closer, I can begin to see a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted, distorted, and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it was about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out a scream that sounds like someone screaming as if their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then another leap and it was gone from sight. Travis is coming over the radio. "Holy shit, keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. We have to get out of here and we have to go faster. Pretty soon we were speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, also a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back, and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. And we do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. And that's our story from the Navajo tribe.
Interesting.
And those are the accounts of the Skinwalkers that when they happen. And I just recently heard a story on the 3 a.m. podcast. So if anybody hasn't had a chance to go check that one out, it's literally called the 3 a.m. podcast. They brought a woman from the Navajo tribe on to talk specifically about the Skinwalkers, what they meant to their tribe. And she retold a story of her grandmother having one of these Skinwalkers try to attack her house while she was in it with her kids. Her kids were asleep. She heard this thing rushing the house. And of course, on the Navajo tribe, their traditional huts that they lived in don't have doors.
Okay.
It's just a rug that hangs over the doorway. But they can't, supposedly they can't enter without being invited to. So it was rushing the house and just brushing up against stuff. Well, she was, apparently this woman's grandmother was like a kick-ass woman. Grabbed a gun, loaded it, fired, got it all ready to go, and just stood there by the rug. And when she heard it coming the direction of the house again, she just whipped that rug out of the way and just started firing. Boom, 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 boom. She heard it yelp, heard it scream, and then it ran off. She went outside with her light and looked around, and apparently she had shot off a hoof. It looked like what was a hoof. And it just laying on the ground. She goes, well, I'm not touching that. So she went back in the house, went to bed. Like nothing was wrong. Next morning they wake up, and it's not a hoof on the ground. It was a human foot.
Fun.
So they contacted the elders of the tribe, and the tribe elders just casually were going to go around town and see who was missing the foot. Because supposedly the lore goes that if you find out who the Skinwalker is, because of the deal that they've made with this dark entity, their identity has been revealed. They have to kill themselves.
Oh, okay.
That's how you defeat the Skinwalker, by finding out their identity.
Huh. Interesting. So, yeah, that's the first I've heard of this legend. So I'm not even
Are we going to
sure
go outside walking around in the dark?
Yeah, I'm not even sure what to say about it. And it's gotten really dark here since we started talking. But I do want to mention something, because you know that I've studied shamanism for several years. And I have one foot in the science and one foot in the woo-woo. And so I straddle that line pretty well, I think. Maybe not. Maybe it's just my ego. Anyway, one of the things that I do is a lot of times when animals or insects or birds or whatever keep showing up, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I want to look up the meaning of this. So I don't know if you heard me typing, but I decided I'm going to look up moth and see what this means.
What does my moth mean?
Well, get this. And this is the very first hit, the very first one that comes up on Google. And it's some, I don't know, looks like some chick's
Damn it,
blog.
I caught him and I let him go.
But anyhow, it said the meaning of moth, so it's like the spiritual meaning, or, metaphysical meaning, or whatever you want to call it, spirit totem. It said a moth, and I'm just reading what this website says. It's not very long, so I'll read the whole thing. A moth landed on my leg twice today. Not only did he land, but he would not leave. He was a muddy brown color, not as spectacular as the bright colored monarchs that give people pause. However, because of the moth's persistence to be in my presence, I had to look up its meaning, which is why I looked it up, because this thing won't leave you alone tonight, Mike. First words, right here. The moth is a shapeshifter, as told by my favorite animal spiritual guide, Ted Andrews. And Ted Andrews has a book called Animal Speak, and he's got 4 or 5 books out. And anyhow, the moth is a shapeshifter, representative of fertility, success, and fulfillment. Moths give notice of a new birth occurring. I'm not pregnant, this is some woman putting this. The birth of something hidden, such as a talent, a gift, or a blessing that is coming to the surface. I have yet to come across an animal totem where the interpretation is bad, like you are going to hell or your life just sucks. Even vultures, snakes, and predatory animals have powerful interpretations of life stages. I felt the moth's presence and unwillingness to leave my leg was a sign that I should not dismiss but pay attention to. I do, however, have that skeptical non-believer part of me who thinks the moth is just like the smell of my sunscreen, and just like the smell of my sunscreen, and needed to rest its wings for a minute. So she's a little back and forth on what to mean, but I find it interesting that the moth is a shapeshifter. It represents fertility, success, fulfillment, something new coming out or emerging.
I would think that somewhere in that description, it needs to also write annoyance, because I've got a motion detection camera up there, and he sets it up every night. That camera has a job. It's supposed to be watching that Ouija board over there.
Yeah. So what are you resisting in your life, Mike?
Sleep, apparently.
Because that which you resist will persist. So, and moths are really persistent. So what thing is emerging? What talent? What new beginning, rebirth, whatever are you resisting? That'd be the question to ask yourself.
I'm in the process of doing a lot of research for something I'm going to start writing.
Oh, see, there you go.
I'm going to do a book that's going to be a collection of horror stories, or not necessarily horror stories, but just creepy, spooky, just to get your hair stand up a little bit on end. That's the kind of stuff I like. But they're going to be short stories, so you can read one or two in an evening and be done. You don't have to worry about it. Okay,
so are you writing the whole book yourself, or are you
absolutely
getting a collaboration of authors together to?
I write them by myself, but if somebody wants to contribute something, I'm more than happy to put them down. So and so contributed to this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was just curious.
But generally I just write myself because once I sit and actually start writing, it's like. It can be scary, some of the things that come out of my brain.
That's true for all of us.
My wife was like, when I started writing my first book, she was like, well, if you write it, I'll do the editing, because she's a great editor. She can grammar crap the hell out of everything I do. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I was like, do it. All right, great. So I got the first draft done, and I handed it over to her on a thumb drive. I said, yeah, just plug it in on your computer and you can go through and do whatever you need to it. Mm-hmm. She came back to me about 10 minutes later and handed me back my thumb drive. And she goes, I can't read this. And I went, why? She goes, what is wrong with you? So, yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Like that. And I was it that bad? It was just like, no. She goes, I'm going to have nightmares tonight from that. And I went, oh, so it was that good.
Perfect. Yeah, so perfect.
I ended up having to do all the editing and drafting myself because I couldn't get anybody to do it for me.
Yeah. I don't know. Like when it comes to monsters and scary stories and things that creep me out, what I've encountered in my life is most of that stuff is just real people.
Yeah. And I'm one of these guys, I'm a horror movie buff. I love horror. And it's getting harder and harder to find good suspense thrillers.
I know.
And
Get Out was pretty good.
Get It. I haven't watched that one yet.
That was a pretty good one. I walked away from that movie scared of white people myself. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, shit.
Yes.
I did watch one the other night that was actually pretty good. It had a good suspense to it. Hereditary.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That one was pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The ending kind of lacked a little, I think. But that's just me. That's the writer part of me thinking could have gone a whole lot more with that. But
I don't think you really realized that it was a supernatural movie until the end.
Yeah. And then I watched another one called The Hole. And this one was it was filmed. It's an indie film, and it's actually on Prime.
Okay.
It's an indie film about the changelings. Have you heard of a changeling?
I've heard of a changeling.
The changeling goes back to the Fae lore again,
Okay.
where you would, where there he goes again, where where a child would come up missing in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden they'd find him. But there's
Okay.
something different about the child. The child isn't the same as it normally is. And the
Okay.
legend of the changeling is the fairies come and take the original child and exchange it for a Fae child.
Okay.
And that Fae child's going to go live in the place of this other child.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird, but that show was actually really good, and that's what happened. And it was all filmed in Ireland.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It almost sounds like a metaphor for trauma,
Yeah.
because trauma changes people in very drastic ways very quickly.
And you made a key point that I want to talk about, that I just, no, not necessarily talk about, just mention it.
Mm-hmm.
The monsters.
Mm-hmm.
The monsters
they're usually
in our
real.
lives are
They're
generally,
usually your neighbors, your friends, your dad, your brother.
I think
real
that's
people.
why, honestly, I think that's why a lot of us look towards fictional horror and everything, because
Right.
sometimes our reality is scarier than that fiction.
Right. Well, Mike, do you study archetypes? Do you read about archetypes
Yeah.
at all? Okay. So if you're familiar with like Carolyn Mace's work or Joseph Campbell's work or anybody who studies archetypes, because I'm a huge fan of Joseph Campbell, huge. And what I see, the more I learn about archetypes, is I look around, like they're not, I don't know, just like the pirate archetype, for example. You know, pirates aren't like these necessarily fictional characters. Once you really start to learn about the archetypes and what their qualities are, you can look around and you can see people exhibiting the archetypes through their behaviors. And so it's almost like we are the folklore. It just depends on what qualities we exhibit in our life. You know, like some people out there do have, you know, like hag-like qualities or witch-like qualities or fairy-like qualities.
We look at the old Norse mythologies, the berserkers. The berserkers, many people thought they actually took on their animal form when they fought, because they were so insane. And then you've got lycanthropes, which werewolves. That's the werewolves, where somebody would become so bestial during their attack of somebody that that people literally attributed it to like a wolf. And
right.
And that's just that, and that's where one of the legends of the werewolf comes from, because there was actually in France, one of the cases that was studied was somebody was actually abducting young girls, and he was killing them and dismembering them and everything, and he was dressed in furs when he did it.
Sounds like a serial killer with a really sick fetish.
Yeah, and the bad thing was, though, it was somebody who was prominent in town. And how they found him out was he was actually injured during one of his abductions. The girl got away, and she had managed to stab him in his hand. And that's how he was found out.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's this story as old as time. You know, it's we try to write off something as supernatural that can be explained by, looking at some prominent figure in the neighborhood. And I don't know why, just because somebody is a prominent figure, that somehow excludes them from being guilty of wrongdoing or, moral offenses or whatever.
No, it doesn't.
It really doesn't. And we see that all the time. Like, people excuse the behavior of the celebrities and the rich and the famous and
the clergy.
And your high paid athletes and the clergy and politicians. And like, we excuse it because they're prominent figures and because they're in the news. And there's so much stuff going on that people just write off and excuse. And I'm like, seriously? And it's across the board. I'm not saying this to be political in any way, because I'm sure that there are people out there thinking I'm talking about the president. Well, no, he's included in the group I'm talking about, but
I'll talk about him.
It is not limited to politics. It is across the board. I mean, it just
to the everyday people within your community.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, how many times have we heard of somebody who was on the head of the PTA or something? Oh, well, did you know that they got, hell, this just happened to us here recently. The head of our coaching program for the high school, he and his wife got busted and are about to get tried for jail time for embezzling over, what was it? Almost $1.5 million. He was a teacher and a head coach for our school here. His wife worked for a company.
Yep.
That's where they were embezzling the money from over a 2-year period.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, but he didn't do that. He was the coach of the high school. He was so good with the kids.
Yeah. Right. And that's where, again, if you go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, the experiencer, the narrator, the observer, the visionary, the narrator always wants to be in charge and the narrator always wants to be right. So you get that mind chatter and that, and that part of who we are hates to be wrong. And even if it is wrong and it knows it's wrong, it will fight to the death sometimes, it seems like.
Absolutely.
To prove that what it knows is wrong is right, just for the simple sake of winning.
Absolutely.
And if you're wrong and you're trying to win, but you know you're wrong and you just want to win, what's the point? Like, what did you really win other than...
You don't gain anything. You don't learn anything. You
Right.
can't. I feel so good about how I look at things. It's like, I want to look at these. Okay, I may not necessarily believe there's ghosts everywhere, but you know, there's so much stuff that's happening in our world that we can't explain.
Right.
And I attribute myself to one of my favorite shows, The X-Files. I'm basically Fox Mulder. I want to believe. Show me. Of course, I'd look nothing like David Duchovny.
I love that show. That's one of my favorites.
I actually, this is funny because I actually started rewatching it, and Amazon allows you to download now to tablets. And so
okay.
I've been downloading like a season at a time and taking it with me, and just, it'll be somewhere like, oh, I'm going to watch an episode of X-Files.
Yeah. I rewatched all, 11 seasons a couple years. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. I spent the whole year rewatching all of the
I'm on season 3 right now, and I'm looking at these hairstyles going, oh, God, I can't believe we had hair like that.
Yep, we sure did.
Oh,
girls had hair that was so feathered it, made a dog's butt in the back.
Okay, see if you remember, if you're my age. Do you remember The Wall?
Yep.
I don't know. Aquanet Wall. And the rest of it was all down except for the bangs.
You'd wing out the sides and you'd make it stand up and
and I swear it was some of the girls in my school would be like, the higher you can get it, the more prominent you are. I literally watch them would lay their head down on their desk and fold it out, and somebody would spray it for them, and then they'd peel it up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I never did that.
And I was the guy at the back of the room going, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah. Oh, I did. I had the 80s perms and the really big, huge hair, but I don't remember getting into contests with who could have the tallest hair.
And the mullets.
Oh.
And now the mullet is coming back.
Not here. I can't even commit to bangs. That is way too much of a commitment. I can't do it. I'm like, yeah. I told my hairdresser, I'm like, as soon as I can't tuck my hair behind my ears, that was the first day I sat in her chair. I said, as soon as I can't tuck my hair behind my ears, that's the day you're fired and I'll never come back. She said, okay, I understand. I'm like, great.
And see, my wife likes her hair really short because it just drives her insane. And I generally like to keep my head shaved, but I let it grow out for a while. And she's like, I like it. I like you better with hair. Damn it. It's so hot down here.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't like to mess with my hair. It's too much work.
That's why I shaved my hair.
Yeah, mine's too thick and coarse to keep it short. It just looks like it explodes because it's thick, it's coarse, it gets frizzy, and
well, come down here where the humidity is, and it'll go limp quick.
No, my hair explodes in humidity.
Oh, then no, yeah,
it explodes.
And it go poof.
Yeah, it does. It totally explodes.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer,
It's bad.
we have done a 90-minute session tonight.
Oh my goodness.
This was awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to add before we get off of here?
No, I don't think so.
I think this worked out pretty good doing this. We need to look at some more topics. You possibly like during the week or something like that. If we want to get together and do this again, maybe look up some articles and topics of things that just something that you may have been interested in that might be considered the paranormal, strange, or weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want some weird news, I will tell you, just Google Florida.
Oh, I know. The Florida man stories are the best.
Did you hear the most recent one that was just yesterday? 74-year-old man has been arrested for performing an illegal castration.
I did see that.
A 56-year-old man that they met.
It didn't work.
They met on the dark web, and apparently this other guy had one of those surgical castration or eunuch fascinations. And they met on the dark web, and this guy said, "I can do it for you." Did not work out too good.
I didn't read the article. Like, I saw the headline and I didn't read the whole article. So what was he doing?
Like, did not work out good on it. The guy almost bled to death.
Oh, okay.
That's why the police got involved, because the guy that performed the surgery started to panic, and he called it in.
Oh, okay. So he was performing it like a surgery. I saw the headline and I was on my way out the door. I went to visit family this week, so I had a couple days off. So I'm a little off kilter on my normal routine this week.
Yeah.
And anyhow, I was on my way out the door and didn't have time to read the whole article. And I was wondering, I'm like, what did he do? Was that like a surgical thing, or was he trying to do it like you do with animals and like put the band on it until it just?
No, it was a fetish thing. Apparently, the 56-year-old guy wanted to be a eunuch. And so they met on the dark web.
Yeah.
And when the other guy showed up to the 74-year-old guy's house, he had the room set up just like a hospital would be. Had anesthetic, had painkillers, had surgical table, and all this stuff. But apparently he didn't consider it. There's a lot of blood flow down yonder.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Huh.
I'm going to pass on that one.
Yeah. Well, we get a little overly confident sometimes as people, don't we? Yeah, I can do that. I can handle that. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, it's like a nip and a snip the tip. We're good.
Read an article about it and you're like, oh yeah, I got this. I know everything I need to know. I can do this.
I saw a video on YouTube how to do this.
Yeah, right?
Okay. I think we just got really crude here. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for tuning into us tonight for the After Dark, and we hope that you enjoyed Jennifer with us on the show, because she brought a lot of insightful information into some of these phenomena that we may be experiencing. If you need to get a hold of me, you can email me at stalkermailbox@gmail.com, or you can call into the show. Tell us your creepy story at 361-433-5739. And hey, guess what, guys? We got a P.O. box now, because some of y'all are getting rid of those haunted items, and you don't need to be doing that. You need to be sending them to me. So you can send it care of Anything Goes Project to P.O. Box 455, Lolita, Texas 77971. Jennifer, give out your information. Unless you don't want a haunted doll.
I'll send you my Annabelle doll.
Oh, I'd love it. Go ahead and give out the information for your show for those who may not have heard you on one of our other podcasts.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my podcast is Yes and the easiest way to find it is to just go to my website on the podcast page, the Yes and podcast. So my website is jenniferwhitacre.com. And let me spell that for you.
I was going to say spell it.
Yeah, it's the English spelling, not the German. So it's JENNIFERWHITACRE.com. And
awesome.
Yeah, if you want to email me, it's info@jenniferwhitacre.com.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you once again for coming on to the show tonight, and to our listeners. That's it. We're out of here.
Thanks, Mike. See y'all later.
Now, here comes the music.
want to thank you for tuning in to the Anything Goes project. If you like this show, subscribe and share it. That would greatly help us out. To contact the show, email us at stalkermailbox@gmail.com. We love hearing from our subscribers and our listeners. The Anything Goes project can be found on iTunes, Castbox, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn, and many other Android applications. And once again, thanks for listening.